Welcome everybody, so I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review. This is going to be for Star Wars A New Hope. Now this movie is one of the best films in the franchise and I will easily give this an A+. So here are some of the reasons why I'm going to give it that A+ rating. This movie relies heavily on the use of Joseph Campbell, his sort of books about the hero's journey. So if you have not read those, you should definitely check those out before you watch this movie, just because it'll give you kind of an insight of what George Lucas was doing when he was creating it. Now this movie is really heavily inspired not only by Joseph Campbell's work, but Flash Gordon, as well as some other serials that George Lucas watched as a kid, especially sci-fi films like Flash Gordon. This movie stars Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford as Han Solo, as well as Carrie Fisher as Leia Organa. This movie is pretty much about a young boy who pretty much lives on a farm in Tatooine. He's working underneath his surrogate father, who doesn't really want him to join the Empire Flight Academy, but Luke Skywalker, being the kind of hero that he is, originally wants to join the Empire just because all of his friends are joining and he wants to kind of help them out and sort of battle the people in the Resistance. Now Luke Skywalker will kind of regret that decision later on when his family's home is pretty much burned to a crisp by stormtroopers. He sees the horrifying ways that the Empire has pretty much brought upon his family. His family is just pretty much a poor family trying to make a living, where he also knows that he has a sort of lineage that goes back into the Jedi Order, but he's pretty much kept secret from that for a while. Ben Kenobi kind of finds him after he's attacked by sand people, and this kind of goes back towards the Anakin Skywalker scene, where Anakin Skywalker pretty much destroys an entire village of sand people. Ben Kenobi pretty much taking him under his wing and telling him that his father was Anakin Skywalker, or Darth Vader, and that Darth Vader's legacy kind of stemmed from this lightsaber that he pretty much gives him, which is the Graphics lightsaber that you can buy pretty much from Ultra Sabers, Saberforge, and Corbanth, and a bunch of other lightsaber companies. This movie takes a lot of inspiration as well from the King Arthur stories and stuff, or the sort of myths where you have the sword in the stone, pretty much how the hero has to pull the sword out of a stone and then he becomes sort of a hero after that. This movie delves a lot into religion and stuff, with the Jedi Order being kind of mixed between samurais and sort of religious leaders and stuff, where they're really into sort of religion and sort of being kind of monks within the Jedi Order, mostly because the Jedis have pretty much fallen, which you kind of see in the later films with the prequel trilogy, being the ones that came after this. So you get a little bit of that history where Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Luke Skywalker that his father fought in the Clone Wars and that, Anakin Skywalker was his father. Not until later in The Empire Strikes Back do you find out that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader, the biggest badass in the entire universe. Darth Vader is the villain of this franchise, and he has Leia Organa kind of held up in a prison, and that's when, Luke Skywalker grabs Han Solo and recruits him to kind of help with rescuing her. Han Solo is this smuggler. He doesn't really want to do this job, but he figures there's a lot of money in it so that he will help Jabba the Hutt out, because Jabba the Hutt is pretty much a gangster that hires out, Han Solo and a bunch of other really scummy people to kind of carry out these sort of raids that you would call them, I guess. So, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, C-3PO, played by Anthony Daniels, all go over to the Death Star. They try and rescue Leia Organa. They're eventually captured, and then they have to break themselves out of this sort of trash compactor. And the trash compactor scene is one of my favorites, just because, you got some sort of alien creature that's kind of crawling around in there with them. You've got Chewbacca, played by Peter Mayhew, who is freaking out and stuff in this, and there's a lot of really cool action sequences, not to mention sort of the final fight where they kind of take on the Death Star run, and you see Skywalker, he finally uses the Force, even being the best at, harnessing that Force throughout most of this movie. Ben Kenobi trying to train him in the ways, especially in the earlier parts of this film, where you see Ben Kenobi sort of use these powers throughout the city of Tatooine, the village that they go to, and, later on, Ben Kenobi's use the Force, Luke, and he shoots the plasma bolts into the Death Star, which kind of destroys and kind of it bursts into a bunch of fireballs and shit, and you see a bunch of TIE fighters and X-Wings, and actually Harrison Ford at one point in time rejects sort of helping out Luke Skywalker. You think that he's pretty much gone, and then all of a sudden at the end of the movie kind of helps him out, which is pretty much a hero's journey moment. You have the person that you think is not going to help him out kind of coming in at the end and swooping in and killing everything and taking out the Death Star, which I think was one of the greatest things that I've ever seen in cinematic history. And that Death Star trench run is pretty much using practical effects mixed in with CGI. They use a lot of blue screen with the miniature models and stuff, and they use a lot of pyro effects and stuff like that for the explosions. And this movie was really revolutionary for its time, especially with lightsabers and stuff, and how they utilize the sound in post-production. None of the other lightsabers in any of the films kind of utilize sound cards, which I think is really cool, especially since nowadays people have lightsabers that utilize the sound cards and stuff when you buy them on specialty websites. So if you're looking for lightsabers, the stunt sabers, the ones without sounds, are a little bit more accurate. Like I've said before in countless other videos, Chewbacca gets a lot of screen time in this. You get C-3PO and R2-D2 who have their own little side quest where they get lost in the desert. They have to find their way back, and that's where you see Luke Skywalker pretty much purchase R2-D2 from the sand people, or you see Skywalker purchase R2-D2 from this dealer and stuff, and then he finally gets this droid and it eventually helps him defeat the Empire and the Death Star. And this pretty much leads on to the next movie, where you'll see sort of Luke Skywalker take on that hero's journey once again and defeat Darth Vader, not before getting his hand chopped off and everything, but that's for a different review. But when I saw this as a kid, I was introduced to the original trilogy first before I was ever introduced to the prequels, and just that scene where where you see Luke Skywalker staring off into the twin suns after his family's like, no, we really want you to stay here another year, and Luke Skywalker being like, but all my friends are there and everything, and that he feels like he's being held back. It's something that I highly do sometimes feel myself. Like, I think like anybody can relate to that. And there's a lot of really cool moments and one-liners in this movie that I think everybody will kind of get to know and love. They also introduced I have a really bad feeling about this in this movie, and that becomes pretty much a staple throughout the rest of Star Wars, the oh, I have a really bad feeling about this line, and get a lot of really cool moments with Ben Kenobi, aka Alec Guinness, who then is later replaced by Ewan McGregor, which I think does a really good job sort of emulating Alec Guinness. You know, Alec Guinness being this huge movie star back in the day, and it's really cool to see this movie kind of take on a life of its own even after its release, because, you know, nobody believed in George Lucas when he originally showed people this idea for Star Wars. Movie studios were passing on this opportunity, and then somebody finally gave him a chance, and then it became this huge success that it is to this day, and George Lucas making bank off sort of the merchandising rights for the Star Wars franchise, and eventually selling them to Disney, which we know is pretty much a bad mistake. But everything from down to the costume design to the music by John Williams, which is spectacular in this movie. Like, if you have not heard sort of the Twin Suns theme, or if you have not heard the Luke Skywalker theme at all, you definitely should watch this movie. Mark Hamill gives a really great performance. I know a lot of people give this movie crap because the visual effects aren't on par with most movies to this day, but I highly disagree. I think that this movie pretty much started everything that we know and love about special effects, because ILM was really started because of this movie, Star Wars A New Hope, and they kind of shaped the way that we like movies to this day, with like things like Iron Man and Marvel and the MCU, as well as other films like Jurassic Park. Like, they were really spearheaded by George Lucas and him creating this company called ILM, which now is world-renowned famous, and Stan Winston, who kind of later would come on to help with Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are kind of, you know, interconnected within each other because they're really close friends, and, you know, they're two of my favorite movie directors of all time. So I used to watch this movie non-stop as a kid, and I still watch it non-stop to this day on Blu-ray. Like, I had the VHS tapes and I would rent them constantly from like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video growing up and stuff, and it was just an awesome time. You know, the music is great, like I said before, the one-liners are good, the action is spectacular in this film. The bridge scene where, you know, you see Luke Skywalker, aka Mark Hamill, rescuing Princess Leia, and he shoots that little grappling hook onto the thing, and then he kind of slides across, his stormtroopers are kind of chasing after him, is really freaking cool. The opening scene where you see Darth Vader and he's trying to get the Death Star plans, which you later learned from Rogue One, pretty much got transmitted all over the place, and you see the stormtroopers pretty much bust through the doors and stuff of the ship, and they're kind of shooting all over the place, and then you finally get the reveal of Darth Vader. That was pretty cool. It was pretty interesting to later learn that Darth Vader was later played by someone different than James Earl Jones. They got stunt double to play James Earl Jones' role in this film, and then he would overdub later on in post-production over the voice. And I think that's something that, you know, they should do with the Halo film, where they have a stunt double play Master Chief, and then they ADR, you know, Steve Downes' voice in post-production later. I just think that would make for a really great film, because then you'd actually be able to bring in the voice actor from the games into the movies and stuff, and it would sound like a Master Chief. But that's kind of what they did with Star Wars, where they kind of had someone play Darth Vader, and then they kind of dubbed over his voice, which the actor who did Darth Vader originally was not really that happy about, but he kind of understood where they're kind of having to go with this movie. But, you know, I really like this film. I think that this movie definitely deserves the A+ rating, especially since it now delves into sort of mythology and, you know, religion and, you know, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. I think that fans of all of those things definitely find something out of this movie, and it definitely will inspire the next generation, because I think that a lot of people are going back to the prequel and the original trilogy rather than watching the sequel trilogy after The Last Jedi, but that is neither here nor there. So that is my review of Star Wars A New Hope. Hopefully you guys like this. As always, guys, if you like this review and you want to see more, please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.